Most predators hunt to eat, but this one hunted to punish.
Every culture has a story we tell our children to keep them away from the dark. But in the frozen wilderness of Hokkaido, Japan, the monster wasn't a myth. It didn't hide under beds. It waited in the tree line, watching the smoke rise from the chimneys of people who thought they were safe. This is the story of the Sankebetsu Brown Bear Incident. Even if you've heard the name, you haven't felt the cold. You haven't stood in a hut made of straw while a 340-kilogram predator ripped through the wall like it was paper. You haven't heard the plea of a mother realize she was no longer at the top of the food chain. In December 1915, a small pioneer village called Rokusensawa became the setting for a 6-day massacre that would change Japan forever. It wasn't just a random animal attack. It was a war. On one side, a group of desperate farmers and a legendary war veteran. On the other, a bear nicknamed Kesagake, a creature that had developed a taste for human flesh and a psychological intelligence that defied nature. Why did he do it? Why did he keep coming back? And how did one man with a pawned rifle eventually face down a demon? Lock your doors. Turn up the heat. We're going back to the winter of 1915. Hokkaido in 1915 wasn't the tourist destination it is today. It was the wild north. The Japanese government was desperate to civilize this rugged island. So they sent pioneers, poor families looking for a second chance, into the heart of the forest. The village of Rokusensawa was a collection of kakusa huts. Think about that for a second. These weren't brick houses. They were frames of wood covered in thatched straw and reeds. In a Hokkaido winter, where temperatures dropped to minus 30 degrees Celsius, these huts were the only things separating a family from certain death. The people here were tough. They were survivors. They lived by a simple code: respect the forest, and the forest will respect you. But they had broken that code without even knowing it. Our story actually begins in November, a few weeks before the first drop of blood was spilled. The demon, a massive ushery brown bear later called Kesagake, was preparing for hibernation. But he was hungry. He wandered into a local corn farm to scavenge. The farmers, terrified of losing their winter food supply, did what any of us would do. They grabbed their guns and fired. They hit him. Kesagake didn't die. He bled into the snow and vanished. Now, imagine the psychology of that animal. He is 2.7 meters tall. He is a wall of muscle. And now, he has a lead bullet lodged in his body. The pain kept him awake. He couldn't hibernate. He was trapped in a cycle of agony and starvation. He didn't just want food anymore. He wanted the things that had caused him pain. He began to watch the village. He watched the women washing clothes. He watched the children playing. He realized something chilling. Humans are slow. Humans are soft, and humans are weak. The sun rose on December 9th over a village buried in white. Oda Saburo, a hard-working pioneer, kissed his wife, Amiyu, and their infant son, Hasumi, goodbye. He headed out to the fields with a young man named Mikio. It was a normal morning. The fire was crackling. Mayu was likely humming a song, tending to the baby. Then the air changed. If you've ever been in the woods, you know that hush that happens right before something bad happens. The birds stopped. The wind died. Suddenly, a massive, dark shape blocked the light from the small window of the Oda hut. It wasn't a man. It was a shadow that seemed to stretch forever. Kesagake didn't hunt like a normal bear. He didn't roar. He just acted. With one swipe of a claw the size of a human hand, he smashed through the thatch wall. The kakusa offered no protection. It was like a tiger breaking into a cardboard box. The bear lunged. The baby, Hasumi, didn't even have time to cry. In seconds, the infant was gone. Now, Put yourself in Abe Mayu's shoes. You are trapped in a small, dark room. A 800-pound monster is standing over the body of your child. There is no escape. She didn't give up, though. Historical records say she fought. She threw firewood. She tried to use a small knife. She screamed until her throat was raw. But Kesagake was a seasoned predator. He didn't want to fight. He wanted a prize. He bit down on Mayu's head and shoulder, and this is the part that still haunts historians. He dragged her out through the hole in the wall alive. The snow was stained a deep, violent crimson. The trail led straight into the dark, silent heart of the forest. When Oda Saburo came home that afternoon, the silence of the house was louder than any scream. He saw the hole in the wall. He saw the blood. He saw the empty cradle. Within an hour, the entire village was gathered. Men with lanterns and old, rusty rifles stood in the cold, their breath hitching in their chests. They followed the trail. They found Mayu's sandals. Then they found her hair. Then they found him. About 150 meters into the woods, the lanterns caught two glowing orbs. Kesagake was standing there, guarding a mound of snow. He didn't run. He didn't seem afraid of the 30 men standing before him. He looked at them with a cold, calculating gaze. The men fired a volley of shots. In the dark, with shaking hands, most missed. The bear let out a sound that witnesses described as a low, demonic grumble and melted into the brush. When they reached the mound of snow, they found the truth. Kesagake hadn't eaten Mayu yet. He had cached her. He had buried her remains under the snow to save for a later meal. To the bear, the villagers weren't people. They were a winter's supply of meat. The villagers brought Mayu's remains back. They were broken. They were terrified. But they made a fatal assumption. They thought, we shot at him. We have a body back. He won't come back to a house full of armed men. They decided to hold a wake for Mayu and the baby at the Oda house. They gathered the village's strongest men there, all armed. They sent the women and children to the Nakajima house further down the road, thinking it was out of the way. It was the most logical plan in the world. But Kesagake wasn't following human logic. He was watching. He saw the lights at the Oda house. He saw the guns. And then he turned his head and looked down the road toward the Nakajima house. The house filled with the sounds of crying children and the scent of fear. He realized the food had moved. The first day was over. The village thought they were prepared for a funeral. They didn't know they were preparing for a massacre. It was the night of December 10th, 1915, in the village of Rokusensawa. The air didn't just feel cold. It felt heavy. It felt like the forest itself was leaning in, listening. The villagers were doing what humans always do when they are terrified. They were clustering. They believed in the power of numbers. At the Oda house, where the first tragedy had occurred, the atmosphere was grim. Nearly 15 armed men sat around the fire. They had their rifles cleaned and ready. They were holding a wake for Mayu and the baby. They expected the bear to come back for its cache, the body of Mayu that they had taken back from the woods. But while the men sat there, drinking tea and clutching their guns, they had made a mistake that would haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. They had sent the weakest members of the community, the women and the children, to the Nakajima house further down the road. They thought it was safe. It was further from the forest edge, and there was no food there to attract the beast. They didn't realize that to Kesagake, the entire village was now a buffet. He wasn't just an animal anymore. He had become a strategist. Imagine Kesagake in the darkness. We know from the tracks found later that he didn't just stumble upon the houses. He circled them. He stood in the shadows just outside the reach of the lantern light, watching the Oda house. He saw the men. He saw the guns. He smelled the gunpowder. He knew he couldn't win a head-on fight against 15 men. So, he turned his massive head. He caught a different scent on the wind. The scent of a dozen people crowded into a small space. The scent of fear. He began to move through the snow, silent as a ghost, toward the Nakajima house. Inside that house, there were 10 people. Most were women and children, including a pregnant woman named Saito Take. They were huddled together on the tatami mats, whispering, trying to keep the children quiet. They thought the war was happening at the Oda house. They thought they were in the safe zone. They were wrong. The attack didn't start with a roar. It started with a sound that everyone in that house would later describe as the world breaking. Kesagake didn't test the door. He didn't look for an opening. He simply walked through the wall. One moment, the Nakajima family was sitting in the dim light of a single oil lamp. The next, the entire side of the house exploded inward. Thatch, wood, and snow flew into the room. And in the center of the debris stood the demon. He was even bigger than the rumors. Standing on his hind legs, his head would have brushed the ceiling. His fur was matted with frozen blood and mud. The oil lamp was knocked over in the first few seconds. The room plunged into total, suffocating darkness. Now, try to imagine the sensory horror of that moment. You can't see anything. All you can hear is the sound of heavy, wet breathing, the wet thwack of claws hitting flesh, and the screams of children. The bear didn't have to see. He could smell the life in the room. The first victim was a young boy named Tadeichi. The bear swiped at him in the dark, a blow so powerful it likely killed him before he even hit the ground. His mother, who was holding him, felt him being ripped from her arms. Then there was the chaos. People were crawling over each other, trying to find the door, trying to find a corner. But the house was small, and the bear was everywhere. A man named Sakai, who happened to be at the house, managed to run for the door. He escaped, but he didn't run to get help immediately. He was in a state of pure, primal shock. He ran into the woods, his mind completely broken by what he had just seen in those first few seconds of light. Inside, the bear was systematically moving from person to person. He wasn't eating, he was hunting. This is the part of the story that every Japanese schoolchild knows, the part that makes this incident a national tragedy. Saito Take was heavily pregnant. As the bear turned its attention toward her, she knew she couldn't run. She was trapped against the back wall. Witnesses who survived by hiding under floorboards or in the shadows heard her voice through the dark. She didn't scream for herself. She begged. She pleaded with the beast. "Please," she whispered, "don't eat me. Eat my legs, eat my arms, but spare the baby. Please, spare the baby." The bear did not have mercy. It is a biological fact that brown bears, when in this man-eating state, often target the torso. Kesagake killed Take in the most gruesome way possible. But the horror didn't stop there. When the bear was finished with Take, he realized there were still others in the room. He found children. One by one, the screams stopped. By the time the bear was finished in the Nakajima house, 5 people were dead or dying. Back at the Oda house, the men heard the screams. At first, they couldn't believe it. "Is it the bear?" they asked. "No, it can't be. We are here." But the screams from the Nakajima house were so raw, so filled with agony, that they finally realized their mistake. They grabbed their lanterns and ran down the snowy path. When they reached the Nakajima house, they saw the bear. He was stepping out through the hole he had made, his face and chest covered in fresh blood. The men, paralyzed by the sight, fired their guns. Once again, they missed. Or if they hit him, the bullets did nothing but make him angrier. Kesagake let out a roar that seemed to shake the very trees and vanished into the darkness of the forest. The men entered the house with their lanterns. What they found wasn't a home anymore. It was a slaughterhouse. The walls were painted red. The bodies of the children were scattered like broken dolls. And in the center of the room lay Saito Take. The sight was so disturbing that some of the hardened pioneers fell to their knees and vomited. One of the survivors, a young boy named Yujiro, was found trembling in a corner. He had watched the whole thing. He was only 8 years old. He would live to be an old man, but he would never, ever forget the sound of the bear's teeth against bone in the silence of that room. By the morning of December 11th, Rokusensawa was no longer a village. It was a prison. The settlers realized they were dealing with something they couldn't handle. This wasn't just a pest. This was a monster that had killed 7 people in 48 hours. The news spread like wildfire to the neighboring towns. The demon is here, the whispers went. The government finally took notice. They sent a troop of police and volunteers, over 600 men, to the village. They brought more guns, more ammunition, and more fear. But even with 600 men, the bear was nowhere to be found. He was in the deep brush, watching the army arrive, waiting for the sun to go down again. The villagers were desperate. They knew that if they didn't kill this bear soon, there would be no one left in Rokusensawa. It was then that someone remembered the stories. Stories of a man who lived like a hermit. A man who didn't fear the forest because he had seen the horrors of war. A man who was said to be the greatest marksman in the north. Yamamoto Heikichi. The villagers sent a messenger. "Find Heikichi," they said. "Tell him the demon is real. Tell him we need the soldier." December 12th, 1915. The village of Rokusensawa was a graveyard of broken dreams and splintered wood. The army of 600 volunteers and police had arrived, but they were useless. They were firing at shadows, trampling evidence, and creating so much noise that the bear had long since retreated into the dense, silent forest. They needed a ghost to catch a ghost. They sent for Yamamoto Heikichi. He wasn't a soldier in uniform. He was a veteran of the Russo-Japanese War, a man who had seen the worst of humanity and come home to a life of poverty and silence. He was a local legend, a hunter who supposedly knew how to think like a predator. But when the villagers found him, he was at rock bottom. He had pawned his rifle for sake. Think about that for a second. The only man who could stop the carnage was sitting in a tavern, his weapon locked away for a few coins of liquor. The villagers had to literally bail his rifle out of the pawn shop to bring him into the fight. When Heikichi arrived in Rokusensawa, he didn't join the loud, disorganized militia. He didn't care about their 600-man strategy. He looked at the terrain. He looked at the blood. And then he looked at the forest. He took a puff of his pipe, stared into the dark tree lean, and said, "This isn't a bear anymore. This is a mountain devil." Heikichi knew something the others didn't. A bear is not an idiot. The 600-man militia was doing everything wrong. They were chasing the bear. They were shouting, tracking, and stomping around. Heikichi knew that Kesagake was simply circling them. Every time they chased him, he doubled back to the village. Heikichi decided to break the rules. He stopped looking for the bear's tracks and started looking for the bear's intentions. He realized that Kesagake was returning to the village not just for food, but for territory. The bear had staked a claim on Rokusensawa. Heikichi and a tiny, elite team of experienced hunters left the main group. They moved in total silence. They weren't hunting a bear. They were playing a game of cat and mouse. Heikichi kept his head down, reading the forest like a book. He knew the bear would eventually return to the site of the Oda or Nakajima houses, driven by the bizarre, obsessive hunger that had taken hold of him. The morning of December 14th was bitingly cold. The frost was so thick it turned the air into a white haze. Heikichi and his team had been tracking the bear for days, barely sleeping, moving through ravines and snowbanks that would break a lesser man. Then, they found the sign. The bear was nearby. Heikichi held up a hand. The signal was clear. Stop breathing. Stop moving. He climbed a high ridge, his boots sinking into the powder. He looked down into a clearing. And there, sitting in the snow, was Kesagake. The bear looked smaller than they imagined, yet infinitely more dangerous. He was resting, his massive, scarred head lifted to sniff the air. He was a creature of pure, raw muscle and lethal instinct. Heikichi didn't rush. He didn't fire in a panic. He knelt, pulled his burden II rifle to his shoulder, and took a breath that lasted an eternity. He wasn't the drunk from the tavern anymore. He was a soldier of the Imperial Japanese Army. He was the most dangerous thing in those woods. The first bullet hit Kesagake in the heart. The bear stood up, his roar tearing through the silence of the mountain, a sound of pure, dying rage. Before the beast could even turn, Heikichi fired again. The second shot hit the bear in the head. The 340-kilogram monster collapsed. He didn't struggle. He hit the snow and stayed there. The demon of Sankebetsu was dead. When the villagers arrived at the ridge, they didn't cheer. They stared. The bear looked almost peaceful in death, but everyone knew what was inside that stomach. They performed a dissection right there in the forest. It was a scene that would turn the stomach of the strongest person. Inside the bear's stomach, they found the remains of the victims. They found bits of clothing, scraps of cloth, and human hair. It was the absolute, horrific confirmation that this wasn't just a hungry animal. It was a man-eater. The bear had been in a state of walking hibernation. His internal clock broken by the bullet wound. His hunger turned into a psychotic drive to consume. He was a victim of his own biology, turned into a nightmare by the encroachment of humans. You might think the story ends with the bear's death, but in Rokusensawa, the story was only beginning to die. The village was cursed. Every time the wind blew through the trees, the survivors heard the screams of the Nakajima house. The settlers couldn't stay. Within a few years, the village of Rokusensawa was completely abandoned. The houses were left to rot. The fields were reclaimed by the grass and the forest, and it became a ghost town, a place where the wind tells the story of the 6 days when nature fought back. But the most chilling part of this history involves a young boy named Haruyoshi Okawa. He was 7 years old during the attack. He watched the slaughter. He stood by the dead body of the bear, and he made a promise to the forest that day. He vowed that he would kill 1,000 bears to avenge the people who died in the massacre. He didn't kill 1,000, but he became Hokkaido's most legendary bear hunter, eventually taking down 102 bears in his lifetime. He lived his life defined by that 1 week in 1915. He spent his final years warning people about the dangers of the forest. On the exact 70th anniversary of the attack, he gave a speech in the town square. He talked about the trauma, the bear, and the village that no longer existed. As he finished his speech, he collapsed. He died right there. On the anniversary of the day, his life changed forever. Today, if you go to the Sankebetsu forest, you can find a replica of the hut and a statue of the bear. It's not a memorial to a hero, it's a warning. The Sankebetsu incident remains the deadliest animal attack in Japanese history. But it's more than that. It's a reminder that we are not the masters of this world. We are just visitors. When we push too far into the wild, when we wound the forest and leave it to fester, the forest eventually pushes back. Kesagake wasn't a villain in a movie. He was a bear. But for 6 days in 1915, he held a mirror up to humanity, showing us exactly how fragile we are when the lights go out and the monster comes through the wall. The snow in Hokkaido eventually melts, but the memory of the demon of Sankebetsu, that, like the winter chill, never really goes away. I hope you all have liked this true story about Sankebetsu bear attack. Do let me know in the comment box what story you all would like to hear next. And also subscribe if you have not already. Until then, be safe, be healthy. Goodbye.